All right.
File for the government. Big one.
Cameras on. Thank you for joining us at the new facility. As I look around the table really quickly, I see a dearth of docs. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4. Me. We do not have a quorum. Okay. If we happen to develop a quorum at some point, we will move on to any business that requires a vote. In the meantime, we won't call for any votes, but this will be an informational meeting. All right. First of all, excused from today's meeting, Dr. DiMartino, Dr. Broder, and Dr. Halpert. Some brief correspondence. As you know, last month, because of the state meetings, we canceled the meeting. Ballston Lake was due to arrive and to give us an update on their efforts to provide advanced life support in their community. I'll just read their letter to us dated February 20th, 2012. Ballston Lake EMS was scheduled to present our plan to staff all hours with paramedic level coverage at the February 1st meeting, which was canceled. We thought that a written response would be helpful during this turbulent time. Within 2 days of our previous meeting, Ballston Lake EMS had arranged full-time paramedic coverage for all shifts and has continued this required capability to date and will in the future. This has been accomplished by hiring 2 full-time paramedics to staff 6 duty shifts per week and scheduling per diem paramedics for open shifts through Community Emergency Corps. We have added an additional volunteer paramedic member and have 4 members in the final internship phase of the paramedic course at Hudson Valley Community College. Volunteer ALS members now staff 40 to 55% of duty shifts, and we expect this ratio will continue or increase in the future. You may be interested to note that Ballston Lake EMS regularly provides 1 to 3 ALS intercepts to neighboring agencies each month. We trust this information is useful to Remo. If further appearance is necessary, please provide with the anticipated date of any meeting. What I asked him to do was to answer Bill Pomeroy, who's the president of Ballston Lake EMS, thank him for sending us this letter, and ask if he would come in May to do a quick update for us on how this is progressing and how things are going. We can't have a vote on this, but does that sound acceptable to everybody? So it certainly sounds like they are fulfilling the intentions of our requests. Any concerns?
Will there be any follow-up?
I didn't hear what that. Oh, Rob?
Will there be any follow-up, like 6 months, a year from now?
We're going to have him come in May and talk to us. Sound good?
Yep.
Excellent. Thank you. Dr. DiMartino, by the way, sent us correspondence telling us that she's teaching a course in Vegas this week, and that's why she's not here, and asked us not to hate her. I do not believe it would be possible to hate Dr. DiMartino, so I don't believe that we should. We should ask.
She good?
Dr. Eshkal, would you be so kind as to drop Dr. DiMartino a quick note right now and ask her exactly what the course is she's teaching in Vegas?
That would be called Efficiency Academy, which is something that ENP teaches. It teaches doctors how to move faster, think faster, make earlier decisions.
What does Vegas have to do with that?
Just a great place to be.
It is a great place to be, and everybody can get there from across the country. Because we're a nationwide company, people come from everywhere.
Think faster, card game.
There you go.
And there's great places to go out at night. There's always a good party at any EMP adventure.
Gotcha. No more talking like that. It's sounding like a recruiting speech. Correspondence from Saratoga telling us that from the Department of Health saying that Saratoga is now approved. Saratoga Fire is now approved. Correspondence from Saratoga EMS that says that they are now out of business, and correspondence from Rensselaer Volunteer Ambulance saying that Lynn Kane is their spokesperson. Don, do you want to do a quick update from academic for the group, that most of whom were here for the academic committee meeting anyway?
Sure. Just briefly, we talked about membership. Everyone who wants to have a committee needs to have an application by next month. Anybody who's here who wants to join, see me, see Mike, see one of us, we can certainly try and get you on there. Let's see. Other issues were some problems with student internships. That's going to be looked into as far as not being available, agencies not letting students go to their agencies, and now the question of people wanting funding to provide student internships. We also asked that we get a list of all the regional educational courses and that go up on the Remo site, so we know where courses are available and make it a little bit easier for people to find their courses if they want a course, rather than sort of the way it is now where it's sort of tough to find one specific place where local courses are. And the next meeting will be at 1 o'clock, first Wednesday of next month. Yeah.
Excellent, thank you. Rich, would you like to do a quick update from the REMSCO and the SEMSCO
Sure.
as a combined thought?
Sure. Do you want me to have the CMAC stuff too, or do you have like report or?
I've only got a couple of things that I want to bring up, so.
Okay. REMSCO, really nothing. Jeff's a rep, I'll defer to him, but let me just scan through my SEMSCO report.
Welcome to our new digs.
Okay.
Looking pretty fine.
Important dates to remember, May 23rd, which is a Wednesday, which it always is, at 11 o'clock is the EMS Memorial Ceremony at ESP again this year. There are no new inductees, no new honorees this year, which is kind of really nice. From CMAC, Dr. Henry, who is the only chair CMAC has ever known, stepped down after 17 years of service. He's been replaced by Dr. Timothy Haydock from Westchester region. Hypothermia projects, I'll refer to you, Doc. We now have a minimum statewide ALS treatment guideline for adult patients. We're getting closer to a statewide protocol. I didn't bring a printed copy because I was running late.
Sorry, Rich.
No, my fault. I think that's really all you probably care about in this group at least. If anybody wants my full report, I'll be happy to email it to the group. I think Tim already sent it out in advance of the meeting, maybe about a month or so ago. Did y'all get it? Remember getting it from? Yeah. Okay. That's all I have.
Thank you. And why don't we talk about the Article 30 changes under new business, probably makes the most sense. The three things that turned up during the CMAC meeting of most interest, the first is that I made a presentation regarding our regional therapeutic hypothermia, pre-hospital therapeutic hypothermia program, which was extremely well received. Also presented some data from Erie County. And John Freeze, aptly named physician from New York City, gave a preliminary report on their pre-hospital hypothermia program, which is the most dramatic thing is how drastically cardiac arrest survival has increased in the city of New York over the course of the last 20 years. I'd like to think that's not because I'm no longer practicing down there. But Dr. Freeze and the Medical Directors Bureau, or Bureau of Medical Operations, I think, at the fire department are doing a spectacular job of tracking what they're doing and following those results.
Mike,
So-
can we move on? Did Freeze talk about they're actually beginning their hypothermia during their cardiac arrest, not waiting for ROSC.
Right.
Did he separate that out at all and talk about?
He didn't have outcomes data yet. I think he is having a similar issue, but not talking about it as much as we do up here about getting results from facilities in terms of what the outcomes really are. And because he's talking about such a higher volume, it becomes even more difficult. But his intra-arrest therapeutic hypothermia program seems to be increasing the number of people that are arriving at hospitals alive.
Okay, so the gut feel is it's working.
So gut feel is it's working, just like most of the other programs that have done similar things. So we'll just have to watch and see. The interesting thing is, given the Italian data that came out earlier in the year, I want to say it was January, somewhere around January 28th or 29th, there was a paper that came out that said early induction of therapeutic hypothermia at 17 different ICUs across Italy appeared to be associated with decreased survival to discharge, but each one of those centers did 10 patients or less, so I have absolutely no idea what that data means. And a separate paper that came out the end of last year said earlier is better, so all of that remains to be seen. So Freeze's work is really going to be important, really going to be important. For us, we're unable to follow things as well as we'd like. We're actually going to be making that a specific focus of some quality assurance initiatives this year. And hopefully we'll have that data for this group. So recognize that Dr. Bosco and Dr. Mao have just both arrived. Welcome. We now have a quorum.
Excellent.
Two other items of interest. One is that droperidol has been added onto the statewide formulary for EMS use. And for those of you that have not been following the wonders of the black box warning that arrived in 2001, there have been a number of different centers, most notably Denver, who at this point has thousands of cases of administration of droperidol to undifferentiated agitation. And they have indeed noted that there have been some patients that have developed long QT syndrome, and not one of them has gone into ventricular tachycardia. They give the droperidol, people are bouncing off the walls, the people settle down, then they get an electrocardiogram, and indeed, some of them have long QTs. And then they go home later. Fine. So, droperidol is now been
for
asked.
other indications?
That's what I was gonna
Mike?
say too, and they're probably using high dose also.
They're using it at 2.5 and 5 milligrams rather than the 0.625 that we're used to for nausea.
Right.
Exactly. So droperidol's back. Droperidol is back. And for us, one of the things we talked about at academic briefly is if we end up with a shortage of Versed again, we would be able to add droperidol in for undifferentiated agitation if we chose to create such a protocol, and leave the Versed specifically for treating out-of-hospital seizures, because that way we'd hopefully be able to make the supply of Versed last longer.
Do we have any references, Mike, that you could distribute?
I'll get the references that came
Because
into
I'd
me.
like to use this for our own P&T community at our hospitals. You
Mhm.
know, they're so anal about this black box warning when it came out. There's absolutely no way to get it back on formulary without having some of that data.
I'll get you the
Percent.
references.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And talking to some of the folks, particularly at NEMSP, about their use of this, it's the same things that we remember. It's this stuff just works well. It gets people safe much more quickly than most other drugs. So nice to see it reappear. Very nice to see it reappear. Any other comments about droperidol? Cool. Pediatric statewide ALS. This was actually something very interesting. There were a couple of interesting things that occurred at this EMAC that left me kind of incredulous. But one of them was the statewide pediatric guidelines, which were brought to us from the EMSC committee. The EMSC committee is represented, has an emergency physician, only one emergency physician. It's actually from this region representing us on it. That emergency physician has been tied up with a number of different things at work and has been unable to attend their meetings and was not a part of this subcommittee. They introduced an idea for their review of statewide pediatric EMS protocols that they suggested, actually did not suggest, mandated that there be no intranasal medications in children because there was no efficacy. I asked Dr. Cooper, who was bringing these changes to us, exactly what he was referring to in this and what the group of people that was sitting on the committee was, at which point we found out there weren't any emergency physicians involved, and that indeed the intensivists who sat on this group really didn't practice using intranasal drugs. They didn't really understand them, and so they had said no. We then tabled the pediatric statewide program until that information could be reviewed again by EMSC to include hopefully some emergency physicians that use drugs like this on a regular basis, particularly given the success we've seen from intranasal medication in this region. There were a couple of different things that came up at this CMAC meeting like that. One person was requesting a change in our statewide plan for capnography to include the ability for 2 paramedics on 1 ambulance to take care of 2 patients by intubating them both without using waveform capnography on one of them. Since the waveform capnography requirement came out of this region, Dr. Cushman sort of moved his region forward on that second, we were a little bit surprised by this interest in stepping backwards. So we asked, it turns out this was a situation that had affected fewer than 0.0002% of the patients in that system over the course of 5 years. We chose not to go forward with that. The other one was a pediatric seizure protocol that included the immediate administration of glucagon to every seizing child without the use of a glucometer first. And it turns out the reason they didn't want to use glucometers first is because that program, which involves a city of greater than 1 million people, does not have glucometers on every ambulance, and therefore felt it safer to give glucagon. And then they said that actually most of the patients didn't get glucagon anyway because the medics arriving felt that it was probably a seizure, and so they gave seizure meds first, even though the protocol called for glucagon first. So that one went back too. There were some very, very strange interactions like that through this meeting, and it was kind of unusual. There were some extra people at the meetings, which was nice. Dr. Doynow was at some of the meetings, and I thought that in general they were very interesting. So, any commentary, other commentary from the meetings, Don?
No, not, I mean, at all. It was a good presentation on where they thought the state was gonna go with everything, and reimbursement, which will be a bit of an issue for everyone eventually. And who's gonna get a cut of the pie, since there's gonna be one, at least what they were presenting was, there's just gonna be a certain amount of money, and everybody's gonna try and figure out how they're gonna get their fair share. So, that's what I thought.
Yeah, very interesting. And that will probably be done locally as a presentation as well. That was a very interesting presentation. So, all right, nothing else? Cool. Information from the Hawk. There's a Port of Albany exercise coming up, and there will be 2 disaster life support courses coming up. Do look for those courses. They're very good. There will also be another exercise in September coming up as well. Some agency updates that are informational for Ravenna, Rensselaer Fire, and Niskayuna. I am not going to read through all the BLSFR updates and upgrades. These are all part of the clerical housekeeping that's being done at the Bureau of EMS for BLSFR agencies. I think most of our agencies have come through relatively unscathed with some significant help from our reps. So thank you, Mary and Joe, for getting our folks through, and thank you in particular to Dean, Tim, and Dave Pohl, who's on the other side of that wall somewhere, I think. There's a hand, okay, for helping out as well, because this was a lot of work on parts of lots of different people to make these work.
There's actually 2 more notably missing from this list.
Okay.
North Bethlehem Fire, which is important for your fire department rehab, and Cohoes Fire I saw today. Cohoes is clear, correct. That's
So
what
both
this list is.
and both of them should be on this list, and they're
That
not?
is correct.
Okay.
And it's both been verified with
You're okay?
Okay.
Cohoes and North Bethlehem Fire.
EPCRs, there are some programs upgraded and on their way. Public access defibrillation, there are numerous PAD applications that are continuing to come in. Frankly, I just see that as something very good. And more is better and better. Dean, do you want to talk about ATRIS really quickly?
Sure.
Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I can, yeah, you can fill me in where I missed the parts.
Okay.
ATRIS is a national program that is more or less a AED registry, web-based, and it is basically as you register your PAD programs, it keeps track of all the different items that need to be attended to on a regular basis. So expiration dates of batteries or the actual defibrillation pads themselves, and it sends emails or some kind of reminder to the facilities that install these programs. But in addition to that, it also is a registry of all these devices and where they are and where they stand. We're required to, by the state, maintain files for these types of things and hoping to be able to integrate our requirement and meet the state's requirement and that national registry together, because there's a step 2 that goes with that, where it can become an asset to the different PSAPs to identify the closest PAD unit in the event of a cardiac arrest. And there's lots of different programs and ways to integrate that into patient care. And there's a cardiac arrest next door. Notification could be made here if we had the PAD to go next door with our AED, in addition to the already responding first responders and EMS units. So there's potential to really significantly impact people's lives with this type of program. We're hoping to be able to develop it more so that it helps relieve some of the reporting and record-keeping data that we have here and integrate it into a national program. Streamline things.
What's the name of this again?
Atrus. ATRUS is the company, and it's a national AED registry. Their business model is that the registry itself is free. What they do is they then tell you as part of registering that you have the ability, that you may be placed on a list if your public safety answering point buys into the automatic notification. If the public safety answering point buys in at a cost of pennies per population, then what happens is if an echo call or a cardiac arrest call is identified in the community, the closest AED location to that, by whatever parameter you set up, pops up. And a notification would go out via automatic VoIP notification and text notification to the people that are the responders for that AED. So if we had one here and Colony bought into this, what would happen if there was an arrest in Building 2, for example, would be a notification would go out by text to probably Tim, Chris, Dean, and Dave to say there is a cardiac arrest at Building 2, whatever the location is that's been put into the CAD, respond with your AED to hopefully get more responders to the scene more quickly. The registry itself is being used in a few different places, in particular the state of Minnesota is now using it as their statewide AED registry because they wanted the feedback on PAD expirations and all of this, and some of their communities, like Rochester, I understand, Rochester, Minnesota, is buying into the public safety answering point portion of this. So it's kind of an interesting business model as well as an interesting tool for us to move our AEDs from a big steel cabinet in Dean's office that are providing nothing for feedback to the people that are employing them and nothing for use on a day-to-day basis. So, an interesting idea. We'll see whether or not we can get buy-in from our AED holders, if you will. Any questions? Kind of a neat idea as we move forward. We have a Rotterdam ALS credentialing policy that was passed by the academic committee today and had been approved by staff. Rotterdam EMS has a new medical director appointment, Dr. Barry Mitchell. Do we have Barry's CV on file?
How could you not?
I'm sure we do.
How could you not?
Yeah, I'm sure we do. Yeah. But it's a BLS agency anyway, which doesn't require our approval. And Quaker Street Fire with Dr. McHugh. The Remo website feedback form is something that I'd like everybody to think about for a minute. And this is something that Dr. Funk brought up and asked me to bring here. One of the things that we don't always get as medical directors is feedback from emergency departments when our staff does something well, or for that matter, something badly. And the goal would be to build a form that would enable us to be notified as close to real time as possible through this office if there was an issue. My thought would be that it would include agency, date and time, the person calling, a callback number, and a general nature. And that's it. No protected health information, so we don't have to worry about any potential HIPAA violations. And then where that would go would be to this office, to one person who would then pass that information on to the medical director from the agency who is responsible for whatever occurred. All right, to make sure to pass on kudos or to follow up on a quality assurance concern, but to increase the amount of feedback that could be transmitted between the hospital and the agencies themselves. Any thoughts from the hospitals themselves on this? Todd, you're looking really thoughtful back there.
No, I'm just trying to figure out in real time, how would it work, who would do it? Would it be the charge nurse who pulls up the website and downloads a form to electronically fill out and then email back?
What I see, all right, would be a form that would be online, nothing downloaded, nothing printed off, nothing faxed, just be an online completable form that could be done by any member of the nursing or physician staff, and then would just be completed right then and there. I had thought already about asking Tim if we could have a small budget for this to include either mouse pads or cards that could go to the hospitals with the site location on it, so that people would have that visual cue to send information along, both good and bad, and specifically with the note of good or bad, because there are enough times where people say, hey, your guys did great, but I forgot to tell them. And that's a shame, because we want to pass that along as well. We need to do more of that. Dennis, any thoughts?
You looking for feedback just from the hospital side, or?
No, I'm looking for feedback from all sides, Rich.
Our agency is probably larger than most, but we have that dialogue in place already with all the hospitals we serve, and we frequently get both good and bad news back and forth. I see this as just delaying that communication a little further. I mean, right now they pick up the phone, they know who to call, and it gets handled.
Mm-hmm. I think actually the problem is much less for Mohawk than it is for many of the other agencies, because Mohawk is so accessible. You know, with 36 trucks on the road or whatever all over the place, it's much more accessible in the agencies that only have, you know, one truck out there at one time, and then things just slide right by and are gone.
It sounds good for smaller agencies. My only concern would be picking that. I guess as long as that process still was available to people, it would be fine.
I would never stop anybody from making a phone call directly.
You may also be getting a little bit skewed, because usually from my experience is you guys get the bad, there was a problem, and get any nurse or whoever is able to log in and put in a kudos, you might get a lot more
That's true.
good
You're right,
information.
yeah.
You typically don't take time out to go talk to the charge nurse these guys did really well, it was quite a problem.
It's a good point.
I have a little bit of an issue with the region getting in the middle of stuff that should really be between the department and us as an agency, whether it's me as a manager or Dr. Silvernail as our medical director. I'm not sure the region really needs to be in the middle of, hey, your guys were jerks when they came into the ER. I think you could kind of achieve the same thing by keeping an updated database of all the agencies in the region and just giving that to the staff at the ER. Granted, it's a little more cumbersome, but again, if it really means that much to them to do it, picking up the phone, looking on a list and saying Valatia Rescue, dialing the number, isn't really all that cumbersome.
I think and I thought about that for a little while too, Scott. I think the problem with that is that we have 100 and something transporting agencies in the region, 36 ALS agencies. The chance of maintaining a database of all of those agencies and people making lots of different phone calls to different folks, and potentially losing databases of agencies, you know, losing contact somewhere at that hospital, is pretty real. I agree with you that this is not in any way, shape, or form to take a regional oversight of a quality assurance issue, and that's why what I would set up at this office would be the person who moves that information from one place to another. So basically forwards a comment about Albany Fire to me, or an issue about Valatia Rescue to Dr. Silvernail. would not be somebody within the quality assurance continuum. And regardless of what that is, it would be closed. So basically, that would not be information that would be pertinent to here, other than serving as an information conduit. And I think that's important. We don't need to suddenly start a lot of independent investigations of quality assurance concerns. That's not in any way, shape, or form what I think this needs to be. I think this just needs to be a better way of information transfer, because that's something we don't do well.
Being the good libertarian that I am, it's kind of a big brother kind of thing. And you say that there's no intention there. 5 medical directors from now, what's the intention on how that tool is used? So, overburdening somebody else that already has too much work on their plate for the number of hours that they get to work in a week.
Can't be him. That's for sure.
Well,
right?
whoever it is,
Because
whether it's
his
Chris-
role is QA.
Right.
It's actually,
whether
we'll
it's
be
Chris or
overburdening him.
Whoever, I mean. So, I don't know.
I can see the concerns.
I kind of feel like if they have an issue or they really want to pat somebody on the back, they can find me or Dr. Sobran for that matter. So I don't know, just a concern.
When was the last time you got a pat on the back for your guy?
Very infrequently, of course, but I'm not sure that.
I'm with Rob. I want to see more people get patted on the back more frequently.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see that maybe if we make it easier for people to do that, it'll occur.
I'm not
I
sure
don't know
if the
that it
charge
will.
nurses at Albany Med have the ability to go to their computer at 2 o'clock in the morning to say, "Hey, good job." That's really going to happen either.
That wasn't what I thought you were going to say.
Mike, if you're doing, I think for fairness to EMS people, they need to have access to forms when they get to a hospital
Mhm.
and they're held in the hallway for an hour, or somebody says, "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be here."
Mhm.
I mean, they need to have that feedback too. So if we're gonna do some fairness, we need to be able to have it both ways, I think.
Why didn't you bring them down the street?
That's a great idea.
So, I mean, let's do that.
That's a great
And then
idea.
that can be forwarded to the. you can
And it
do
could follow the same pathway,
Yeah.
the exact same pathway.
Scotland Avenue isn't one way.
Scotland Avenue isn't one way. Actually, next week it's gonna be.
You run the risk.
It's gonna be
of-
no way.
You run the risk of somebody who's angry at the time
Oh, yeah.
firing off this memo because they now have an easy path.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's good to let people have time to decompress, think it over, and decide. If it still bothers them in the morning, they can call. If you make this an instant conduit, I don't think it's gonna turn into a real positive thing. I think it'll just be an easier way to complain. And the other thing is that when you start projects like this, they tend to take on a life of their own, and all of a sudden you can't shoot it dead if you don't like it. So I would be careful getting it started.
Mhm.
Even if you put parameters on it, they just have a tendency to grow and get, never meeting the original intent. They've now taken on a new life, a new intent, and it becomes difficult. So it's an admirable approach to the problem. I'm just not sure it's gonna work, that's all.
It is just a pretext field that people type in, they're gonna put in patient names and stuff like that, thinking that it's a secure website.
What do you do if they report the rescue squad XYZ was observed slapping a patient in the hallway? Is that a reportable? Are you obligated, duty bound now to contact somebody and report that to the health department or whatever? I'm just wondering if there's any
Let's ask the health
residuals
department.
that fall off from some report to the region of an event like that, something
I don't know.
quote unquote reportable.
Probably depends on how we define this in job description for the person who would be doing it, but health department, what do you think?
Somebody slaps some patient, yeah, that's report.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But the question is, if the region gets that
But who's
information by way of
who's responsible to
this
report it?
venue,
Right.
are they obligated, are they duty bound to report that to the health
I
department?
would say yes.
How?
Patient, if you know something, an
Patient.
adverse effect on a patient, you have an obligation to do that. You're not probably.
But I mean, would it be a NIPORS? Would it go through us? Would it go through a hospital complaint?
Well, it would go, the hospital would go through a hospital complaint to NIPOR. It would ultimately show up at Austin. If it came here, I think it would go same as we get a complaint, we get complaints against advanced providers. What's the first place we bring it? We bring it right back to the Remac. Okay, so it would be an interchange of information that way. But yeah, I would say it would have to be reported to us. Now, it might come from the hospital and through NIPORS. But that's
I mean, I can
a
see-
mandatory.
I personally, I could see giving out mouse pads or say, hey, if you see someone do something good, something bad, contact the agency or whatever. 'Cause I can just, you know, what happens if, say Corey's mad at Nash? What if Corey puts some fictitious thing in there about Nash when when he made a ER computer? I'm just picking on those two because they're sitting next to each other, or vice versa. How would you be able to authenticate it?
Well, it's
Well,
supposed to be names.
what I think the important part here is
No,
that
I
it would
mean,
be
but-
a contact to the individual
Who made the-
who made the request. Now, of course, what I suppose Corey could do would be to put a complaint in about Brian, but use Nash's
Nash's name.
name and give Nash's home phone number.
I can see that happening.
Me, and I'll have no clue what to do.
Huey, Dewey, and Louie. See,
You know, I think that one
I just-
may be taking it a little bit too far down the
No, I'm
you
not
know,
t- but it
goofy
just
pathway. I think
knowing
the
the-
slapping patient is an interesting one.
What
I
if
think
we
the-
just put no information whatsoever on it? Just put a request to contact?
Right. Hey, something good. Hey, something bad. Or even just please contact.
Just a.
Yeah, but then what's
request to
that do?
contact.
So then that's gonna get forwarded to the medical director who's gonna call and say, I had called about somebody I don't know about for reasons to call you for whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
Then maybe it goes to agency management instead of the medical director.
I don't know. I mean, what happens now is when I have nursing complaints, they go into my box, I find the medical director or the medics and talk to them. Or if there's a good job, basically the same thing happens. So, I mean, I'm not thinking this is a great idea. If you want to go through with it,
Mhm.
then with my suggestions I mentioned, so it goes two ways, but I think you're making this kind of difficult. I mean, if somebody does a really terrible job, usually nurses will pull them aside at that point. Sometimes they don't. Or if they do a really good job, they'll probably pat them on the back then, I think. That's what I've seen.
I doubt they'll do that, but the,
Oh, you never know.
I think if there was a way to completely automate such a thing, where the database was populated with the contact information for the agency, whether operational or medical director, whatever, and you at Albany Med could go in to the website, pull up the page, click in a drop-down list, Relation Rescue, kudos, date and time, and, you know, do something automated, so then it just shot an email to some pre-populated thing. I mean, websites do this all the time. I get emails from our website, people looking for information on how to volunteer, how to apply, or whatever. They just click a link and it shoots an email to my, to my inbox. So, I mean, but again, I think you're talking about creating a significant amount of work for somebody here in the office, and,
Well, not if it's automated.
well, just to create the thing in the first place. I mean, or you're taking some portion of the budget to put towards creating it, whatever.
Maybe.
Make sure you have a PCR number on it, the date and the PCR number and time. because
It certainly makes
you
it
can
a lot
find
easier if
what
there's
you're
a,
looking for.
if there's a.
PCR
EMS
number
charge
doesn't help
component.
for the ePCR folks.
That may be true.
Yeah, it could be way easier for the electronic charting folks.
Mhm.
And we already kind of get that now from Albany Med.
Mhm.
Albany Med seems to be the only hospital that's doing them, but I do get
The follow-up.
regular ones from Art. And if we have an interesting case that we want to follow up on and there's not one on there, I can email Art and ask him to throw one on there. And he is usually very prompt in doing that. So I mean, there may be a tool already there, and maybe that's more impetus for those non-electronic charting folks to.
I don't know. Is there a case follow-up process through Zollridge?
Not through Zoll, no.
Me emailing Art and he
It's,
sends
it's
us
Carol, yeah, no,
yours.
seriously, Carol
Very
and Art
good
have a
about it.
dialogue, and it works well
It
for
works.
follow-up, it actually does.
Mhm.
And Art often
Okay.
Okay.
Lots of interesting comments. Let's hold the discussion here for a minute. Should we leave this as an action item, not look to build anything, and see what sort of other ideas can crop up as we go? See if there are any other examples anywhere else? All right, and then bring that back next time. Sound reasonable? The proposed 2013 New York State budget relative to EMS. Who wants to take this on first? Rich?
Actually, you did very well with it. Before.
That was a pun.
Yeah.
It's actually, well, the bottom line is unchanged for EMS. It's $19.7 million, which is what they had last year. Of that 19.7, about 18 actually came down to the Bureau. The rest of it disappeared somewhere in a black hole. So the total number is unchanged. What is different is the amount of money that's going to be allocated to the contractors. We don't know what that is at this point. Currently, the regional councils and the program agencies consume about $4 million of an $18 million total number. And we're not sure what's going to be left for the contractors in the new Article 30 changes. And by contractors, I mean remote organizations like Remac. I think that's the budget, the budget, I think. The devil's in the detail. We'll have to see what works out and who's left at the end when all the dust settles and what kind of money is left to support those organizations.
Mary, Joe? Anything to add?
I wouldn't even venture a guess.
Did I get the numbers sort of right?
Yeah, the missing money was the Article 6 funding accounts.
Okay, that's what's different. Okay. That's lost. You're right. Thank you, Mary.
What about the structural reorganization of the system? That's the big issue.
And that's what we just don't know.
We don't know.
Well, I thought it was pretty well prescribed, and as I understand it, the 12 healthcare regions would be reduced by half. And
Well, the 18 will be dropped to 6.
6, right?
8, well, okay, 12 to 6,
Right.
18 to 6, as
Right.
opposed to 12 to 6. And the makeup of those regional councils is, I think, where there needs to be further lobbying.
In particular, what's been occurring from an ASEP perspective.
And I was just going to comment on that.
In particular, and I guess a little follow-up on what I've been doing. There are 2 different groups working really hard on this to make sure that there's some implementation things that ultimately affect us all. ASEP has been working very hard to make sure that there is a very clear physician presence throughout this process. The councils are going to be changed to boards. The boards will be appointed by the commissioner. That's both the 6 regional boards and the 1 statewide advisory board. ASEP is working hard to make sure that there's a clear physician presence in each of these boards, as well as hopefully an advisory position to the Bureau. Then the other things that are of particular interest, that there be a 180-day period for this to implement, rather than for it to implement immediately. What are the others? 100-day implementation.
We requested the 180-day implementation.
Maintaining
Maintaining
the
position.
council as well was one that's out there. Maintaining the current structure of the council. What's the other major issue in the coalition?
Medical director position at the state level.
That's part of the physician component.
ASEP had its lobby day last week, which I participated in. This was one of the 4 major topics that New York ASEP focused on with legislative staffs, with the governor's office, and with the health chairs in both the Assembly and the Senate. I personally was at the Assemblyman Godfrey's meeting, where he is the chair of the Health Committee on the Assembly side, and really a friend to, I think, emergency medical services and healthcare in New York State, and to emergency medicine. And he was very interested in our comments and our concerns, and as I think everyone was that I met with. So, New York ASEP isn't opposing this. New York ASEP is simply stating that the medical representation needs to continue to be a key element of the EMS structure, and that was the bottom line. And New York ASEP was asking for equal representation on the representative councils or boards, whatever they're called, in equal proportion to other members of those committees or boards. And that would, as well as proponent for a medical director at the state level.
Which we currently, we're one of the few states without a state member.
Right. Correct.
I think that actually says, the most important thing, I think, Sam, is that most of the people from upstate, at least, have been extremely supportive of the idea of these changes. And the idea of the change being driven by the SAGE Commission to increase accountability and efficiency in government being things that at least most of the upstate folks have been in favor of. I pulled up a quick letter about the three things. The EMS Coalition, by the way, that's been working on this is FASNY, the United New York Ambulance Network, Volunteer Ambulance and Rescue Association, the New York State Association of Chiefs. And physician involvement is the first. 180-day transition period is the second. The third is that the regional advisory boards must do a good job of being representative of all of the constituents within that region to make sure that there is good rural representation. And last, that there be continued funding of EMS training at all levels. And this actually has been supported very clearly by Ms. Barnes every opportunity she's had to get a microphone in front of her. So that all looks to be very positive thus far. And the big question that we all just have is, what are these ultimately going to look like when the regulations are applied to the legislation, and how this is going to change what we do on a day-to-day basis? We don't know. Good?
Very well said.
No? Okay. Corey, Town of Day, municipal CON update, please.
We recently entered into the intermunicipal agreement with the Town of Day for the Jessup Landing EMS, which is also Town of Day EMS now, Village of Corinth EMS, and Town of Corinth EMS. Everything went through the lawyers, everything's been approved, and I'm basically here today to get this body's blessing to start paramedic level ambulance service in the Town of Day. Right now, it's being done on a mutual aid basis for the Town of Corinth. Since we've got this intermunicipal agreement in place, everything's been approved, we're basically here as a formality today to get this body's approval. Start doing it on a non-mutual aid basis.
Excellent. Is there a motion to support the CDC ALS EMS service? I guess.
Sure, I'll make that.
Motion, seconded by Dr. Judith Allard. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
Drug shortage update. Nash, did you have anything about that? Because you're looking at Back and Rock? Just, no, everybody's getting short of it. Okay. And for those of you that had the opportunity to see it, Kathleen Crowley actually wrote a nice article on, Kathleen Crowley actually wrote, that's not a very nice way of saying it. Kathleen Crowley usually writes a nice article, but on Monday, Kathleen Crowley wrote an article in the Times-Union about drug shortages, in particular drug shortages that were affecting patients that have much more complex conditions than we normally take care of briefly in the street. Our street issues will continue. We will not see these shortages ending, at the very least, over the next couple of years. This is being dealt with up onto a federal level. I'm sure you guys all know about AFNI and hospital situations. And hopefully the hospitals will continue to work together to make sure that these individual crises are handled on an agency-by-agency basis. So, onward for drug shortages. Hopefully we will not have to make any drastic and immediate changes in formulary for the pre-hospital setting because of drugs running out. Any questions about that or anything to add? In hospital stuff.
Mike?
Yeah.
You indicated earlier in the first meeting that you believe that there's going to be some other medications that are going to be short, not just the ones we're already experiencing. Do you
Right.
know of any at this point? when you do, I know normally Remo's pretty good about getting notice out, but you indicated wanting early notification when we may run out of things. Sometimes we don't know that we're gonna, if I don't know that there's a shortage of some random mag sulfate, for example, I didn't find out there was a shortage of it until I was
Nobody
2
did.
months ahead and I ordered what I needed to replace it. So that one, for example, is one that snuck up on me.
It snuck up on everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, MAG snuck up on everybody. The fact that vecuronium and rocuronium are both difficult to get right now. Vecuronium didn't sneak up, rocuronium did. Fentanyl appearing, disappearing, reappearing has been an interesting roller coaster. The fact that all benzodiazepines went short at the same time was just crazy. But we'll just have to continue to follow it when we can. And share as much information as possible into the region, because that's the only way we're going to be able to address these on a regular basis, because they're just crazy. Any other thoughts? Anything coming from in-hospital stuff? No? Dwaynesburg Ambulance, new medical director appointment. Thank you, Dr. McHugh. And hospital diversion notification system and process. Dr. Rushkow, would you like to speak to that for Dr. Vogel?
Sarah and I really didn't talk about it, but I can fill you in on what's going on. We've recognized due to some recent issues where EMS did not get notification about things that they should have when some of our equipment went down. For example, when our traffic went down, when the CT scanner goes down. So there's been a multidisciplinary body that's gathered, and they're trying to figure out a multi-hospital system that we can better mesh with EMS to advise people, for example, if they're having a stroke or not, our CT scanner's not working. So it's a work in progress.
Okay, gotcha. I just talked to staff here, and what we're going to do is work to create public safety answering point lists for each hospital to be able to get that notification made by the hospital staff as efficiently as possible. So at least you'll have an easily accessible list of the most likely 6 or so public safety answering points that would affect Samaritan Hospital or would affect Memorial Hospital, and we'll make sure to do that as reasonably as we can.
4 o'clock.
Right.
Does anybody think that it would be helpful for the region to develop sort of a straw dog, I hate to bring this up, but a straw dog policy relative to diversion for our region? I mean, we do this in our local communities, you know, but Saratoga and Albany, that doesn't make any sense, you know. But Albany hospitals sort of cooperate amongst themselves. You know, the Troy hospitals kind of cooperate amongst themselves, and Schenectady is one system now anyway, so it really doesn't affect Schenectady that much. But I don't know, I'm just asking, I'm throwing it out there for discussion. You know, that if and when you go on diversion, this is how you have to do it. You can't do it if the other hospitals in your local community aren't agreeable. I'm not saying we should or shouldn't, I'm just throwing it out there for discussion.
I mean, the way it seems to work now is really just charge nurse calls the other charge nurse and
Yeah,
us and.
I mean, in Albany, we don't ever have an issue. I mean, it's always, we're calling each other, making sure we don't go on diversion if you can't do it and vice versa. I think what we've done, it works, but
I think that might actually be a good agenda item for the nurses committee to talk about it at that level. I think if we were to formalize anything beyond what we currently have, we would probably tread into DOH language issues very quickly and exactly what the requirements are for a true diversion and the notification processes that need to be made to the DOH.
oh, forget it. It's
Yeah,
just,
and
I'm
that
just
might be
bringing it,
something
yeah.
that we shouldn't, and certainly what Dr. Rushkow's talking
We don't
about
want to make it more difficult.
would probably be something where it's a capability issue, not a busy issue, which is usually what our conversations between charge nurses are in Albany. We may tread into ground that becomes murky quickly, but having the nurses committee talk about that may be a really good agenda item for them.
One thing that seems to be an issue is how to notify EMS folks. I mean,
Yes.
part of it is generally the conversion only lasts for a short period of time, but there's no good way to get a hold of anybody anymore to do it. I mean, it used to be called Remac, and Remac would really help and call them. But now, I mean, the only way that ends up happening is they call on the radio, they're told on the radio, at least that's how we're doing it, you know, if we're on diversion pool or whatever. So it may be a better way that there's at least a call list that they can call.
Well, that's why I thought if we put together from this office a list, hand it to St. Pete's and say, hey, here's your list of calls you've got to make. You've
Right.
got to call Guilderland, you've got to call Colony, you've got to call City of Albany, you've got to call
Right, just
the Albany
list of
County
local
Sheriff's
PSAPs
Department.
so they know
You know,
what-
so here's your list of most common PSAPs to arrive at your back door. And specifically, you know, most important for situations like Bruce is talking about, where there is a planned capability of that institution that can't handle it. You know, and hopefully that will make it a little bit easier. So, a PSAP polling is a difficult process, and that may be something that with the implementation of the new CADs through most of these PSAPs over the course of the next year or two, we may have more ability to have
Communicate back and
intercommunication
forth.
between those PSAPs. We'll have to wait and see.
I mean, I know out in Syracuse area, because I've listened a few times on their radios, they seem to have daily updates where this hospital is green, this hospital is red, but I don't know if that's worth even looking into.
They have a very different plan of how they move ambulances out in Syracuse, so doesn't even
Doesn't work.
pertain to us,
We should
unfortunately.
look at Arizona to talk about what is absolutely gorgeous. They have centralized every hospital, green, red, yellow. Any particular machine is down that day, that comes into it, all goes through a central dispatch. We are very, very far away from that. Not even worth discussing at this point, but I like the idea of having a PSAP list that is total, and then each hospital, based on what the issue is, can decide which PSAPs they call, based on what the problem is. I clearly don't need to call Columbia County for the problem with my CT.
But Memorial should.
Right.
Because Scott may very
That's why
well
you
be
give them
showing
massive
up with
list and then let
a
each
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
over 2/3 of our patients now go to Albany Hospital.
Wow.
It's amazing how many, it used to, 10 years ago when we started, when we first switched to paid, it was exactly the opposite.
Mhm.
And now 2/3 of our patients go to Albany, which is why CMH just opened an urgent care center in Glacier.
That's interesting.
They didn't say that, I said.
Gotcha. On video, you said that.
I did.
Is there any other new or old business? Anybody? No. Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Dr. Bosco, thank you. Seconded by Dr. Doynow. Any opposed? Thank you all.